New York. Now, ordinarily, the sixth-place finish by Carl Lewis in the 100 meters at yesterday's track and field trials would have been the biggest track story of the meet, if not the year. But Lewis's worst finish in a major championship in 11 years was only the biggest story on the track. Off the track, 400-meter world record holder Butch Reynolds won approval from the Supreme Court to compete in these trials. When we left you yesterday, TAC, U.S. Track's governing body, had postponed the men's 400-meter heats to 8 o'clock Eastern Time last night. To no one's surprise, those races were later postponed again. Now there is a fourth different scheduled start. The first round heats have been moved to Tuesday at 4 o'clock Eastern Time. Also, late last night, TAC, which had appealed the 11th hour decision issued earlier by Justice John Paul Stevens, learned that the full Supreme Court had rejected that appeal. Obviously, there is no further appeal in the American legal system. For more on the story now, let's go down to New Orleans, site of the trials, and Tom Hammond along with Craig Masbach. Tom?
Well, Bob, there was no race today, as you said. The race was postponed, but there was at least a glimmer of hope that the international body, the IAAF, might be softening its stand on contamination, that the runners who competed against Butch Reynolds would not be barred from the Olympics. All this came about at a meeting just after 11 o'clock New Orleans time today, conducted by Frank Greenberg, who is the president of TAC, the American ruling body. He explained to the athletes who had assembled here that the new time schedule would go into effect beginning on Tuesday, which was scheduled to be a rest day with no activity at all. Now it will be the site of 2 rounds in the 400 meters. The athletes did get one concession in that the rounds will be separated by 5 hours of time. They will get some rest. We have people standing by now to give you full reports. Let's go to Gail Gardner, who is with Frank Greenberg, the president of TAC.
Okay, Tom, thank you very much. First of all, why the change in attitude by the international governing body?
Well, Gail, a lot of us were up all night after we received the Supreme Court decision last evening. We have been in contact with the IAAF, our international federation, and we've shown them, this is a number of people that have spoken to them, to tell them that this dilemma that we're on. First, we have the highest court of our country saying that we must let Butch in, and we have the highest power sport telling us that we have to keep Butch out because he's going to contaminate other athletes. We're happy to say that early in the afternoon, we have heard from Dr. Primo Nebbiolo, and he is going to poll the entire IAAF council. That's 23 members who about a month ago said that Butch was certainly going to contaminate, and we're going to hopefully by tomorrow have a poll so that all athletes will be able to run against Butch without fear of contamination.
Now, this poll, phone and fax, what is your sense of what the result is going to be?
Well, I'm hoping very hard that it's okay. I know that our person, Olin Castle from the United States, Dr. Nebbiolo, promised us that he would do everything he can to recommend, and I'm looking forward that we're going to be able to get this exception passed so that everybody will be able to run on Tuesday.
What if it doesn't happen?
That's a good question, Gail. I'm not sure. We'll have to go back to the drawing board, but I really hope that this is going to work.
Okay. Let me ask you this. Let's say that they do go ahead and say, okay, no one will be contaminated. The race is held. Butch runs. He makes the Olympic trials. He makes the team. He goes over there. There is no guarantee, is there, that he can compete for the United States?
That's exactly right. What will happen is that event in Barcelona is run by the international body. They issue the credentials. They issue the numbers that they have to be worn when they run, and then it'll be Butch and the international body whether or not they allow him to run.
Okay, and speaking of Butch, let's go over now to Todd Christensen, who is with Butch Reynolds. Todd?
Okay, thanks a lot, Gail. We're here with Butch Reynolds and with Brad Hunt, his representative. First of all, Brad, there has to be a lot of satisfaction in the softening of the IAAF stance where Butch is concerned.
Well, we recognize this as somewhat of a victory for Butch, but I also appreciate the turmoil that this whole ordeal has put the event in, and I feel a lot of compassion towards those athletes who have been treated like a yo-yo over the last 2 days on whether or not the race is on today or off today or what time. So I feel some real compassion towards those athletes as well.
Well, certainly they have had to adjust their focus a little bit, but my response to them has been that they've adjusted it for 2-3 days. Butch Reynolds has adjusted it for some 21 months. How do you feel now?
Well, no, like I said, Todd, this is definitely an issue about athletes' rights, and I'm just happy right now that the Supreme Court made a stand and an issue to protect the athletes' rights. It's been tough, a very tough 21 months for me, but I have endured the strength, the physical, and the spiritual belief to overcome.
Brad, one of the things here is that it's your contention that this could have been rectified a lot sooner than this.
Well, Todd, the process which TAC and the USOC have set up to review matters such as Butch's drug allegations clearly exonerated Butch of all charges October 3rd, 1991. Since that time, we've been on a collision course, and TAC's position has always been, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. We'll wait and see. I think TAC underestimated the determination and conviction that Butch had to follow this thing through to its ultimate limit.
Butch, one of the things that is concerned is that everybody says you're being selfish. How do you respond to that?
Well, you know, Todd, there's no way I can be selfish because I, right now, is subject to another 4-year ban. I made a stand for the athlete's rights because I am an athlete. There's no way in the world that we can compete internationally and have the rights that we have taken from us. It can happen to Butch, it can happen to any other athlete. That's what I try to make the athletes aware of. What happened to me can happen to them. And I think it's my duty to make sure it doesn't happen to myself again or other athletes.
Okay, Butch and Brad, thanks so much. I appreciate you joining us. Now, behind me, I have standing with me Joe Douglas, somewhat of a dissenting opinion where this is concerned. Joe, you're of a mind that the situation that Butch is putting forward here is a little bit selfish on his part. You feel that he should step aside.
Well, the athletes are put into a precarious position because they don't have the opportunity to run and not be contaminated. We have to have an IAAF ruling so that if Butch does run and the athletes compete against him, that they are then eligible to run. Up to 9 o'clock this morning, we did not have that decision. So had they run yesterday or the day before, all athletes would have been contaminated. Butch would have been contaminated for 4 more years. I talked with the IAAF, and they said they would have sanctions against him for 4 more years, and they would have sanctions against the other athletes who competed against him.
But Joe, given the circumstances, if his situation had been Steve Lewis or Danny Everett, wouldn't you have done the same thing? Who you represent, wouldn't you have done the same thing?
No, I wouldn't, because if I have to look after the interest of my athlete, and had Steve Lewis or Danny Everett been in that situation, which they're not, they have never been accused of drugs, they've never been tested positive for drugs. And if there was a situation where they would contaminate other athletes, you have to look at the total picture. Butch could have waited until August. Then he could have competed. He wouldn't be contaminated, and all the other athletes wouldn't have been put at risk. As it is now, the other athletes are put at risk. And I think that's a selfish, and the question now is, will Butch run when all the athletes come together? Because my understanding now is that the IAAF is polling its members, and they expect that they will, for this particular competition, waive the contamination rules. I believe that Butch will then receive sanctions against him, but I believe the other athletes are free. And if that's the situation, then we're going to compete.
Okay, thanks so much, Joe. Now let's go upstairs to Craig Masbach. Craig?
All right, Todd. Tom Hammond with Craig Masbach. And Craig, you've been following the situation closely. What's your best estimate of what happens next?
Well, I don't think anyone's ever accused the IAAF of being an outrageously democratic organization. Dr. Primo Nebbiolo, the president, obviously is interested in bringing this situation to an end, at least for the case of the trials. He will poll his members, but I think he will suggest to them that they approve his anti-contamination measure just for this meet, and the trials will go forward. What I wonder will happen, though, is whether Kurt Flood will sort of be, whether Butch Reynolds will become the Kurt Flood of track and field. In other words, he will win this battle but maybe lose the war in the long run. He'll push the law forward, but he himself will not get to compete in the Olympics.
Okay, Bob, no race, but at least some hope.
Tom, Craig, thanks very much. And folks, at the risk of being redundant, we're going to try and clarify here because some of this is confusing. And for those of you who are not following this story until today, let me just make a distinction. Contamination has nothing to do with drugs itself. It's the word that is used to signify what might happen to other athletes, innocent third parties, who run in U.S. track trial heats against Butch Reynolds. The IAAF has said anyone who competes against him would be banned along with Butch Reynolds and therefore be ineligible for the Olympics. And the term that is used for that is contamination. Now, of course, what Joe Douglas said is somewhat questionable. In talking to Todd Christensen, he says Reynolds could have waited until August, at which point his 2-year suspension would have ended, and then everything would have been okay. Of course, but the Olympics are over by then, and Reynolds at this stage of his career isn't looking to 1996 in Atlanta. He's looking to these Olympics, and it's important to note, again, for those of you who haven't followed this story throughout and are just picking it up now, that Butch Reynolds has always contended that he is clean and that the testing procedure is flawed, or was flawed, when they tested him positive after a race in Monaco in 1990. Okay, to clarify, between now and Tuesday's scheduled heats, the 25-member council of the International Track Federation is to be polled by the organization's president, Primo Nebbiolo. They will vote on whether to waive that so-called contamination rule. If they do, it means no one running against Reynolds will be suspended, as had been previously threatened by the IAAF, and that threat had caused American track officials to withdraw their support of Reynolds out of concern for the other athletes. A simple majority is required to pass the measure. It's believed they will vote to waive the contamination rule. Earlier, we talked with IAAF General Secretary Istvan Julai, who said the first aim of any world sports body can't be to punish innocent people. That is a quote from Julai.
Contamination rule, meaning that those running with Reynolds face no discipline. Reynolds ran in lane 7. He finished in 44.58 seconds, about a second and a half off his world record time. Then he raised his fist in the air as he crossed the tape. There's virtually no chance that Reynolds will be running in Barcelona, but with his court order, he had a police escort to run today. After the race, his jersey said drug-free body. As he continued his fight against a 2-year steroid ban he says is grounded in bad lab procedures.
Crowd understands the rights of an athlete, more so than IAAF might.
Rights of a person.
Rights of a person, rights of a citizen.
You think the guys are better, Butchie?
The 400-meter guys? No, I think they're very supportive. I think they realize that I'm here to make a stand and statement. I think they realize that I could be facing a 2 to 4 year ban as well as they could. I took that risk knowing that.
He got cheers, and I think it's nice to have someone believe in your opinion. And but the bottom line, I think the IAAF is going to get the last word in all this. But it's good that he's out there, he's competing, and hopefully he's proven his point and something positive comes out of it for him.
6 of the 7 runners with Reynolds in his seat to advance with him to the quarterfinals. They'll run again this evening. Even though the contamination rule was waived today, the IAAF did warn U.S. track officials that if American courts act in this area in the future, there could be grave damage, in their words, to the Atlanta Olympic Games in 1996.